Take one unclaimed cadaver.
There had died at St. Stephen's Hospital a laborer of no fixed abode.
Give him a name, a rank, a British uniform, and false mission papers.
They make him a real person with an entire backstory.
And set him adrift where the Germans will find him.
Mincemeat is an example of great ingenuity and just the way that the human mind can work.
It's so insane that it's brilliant.
And so begins Operation Mincemeat, an incredible Allied deception to divert the Reich armies from Sicily. This is the true story of the spy who never was, the corpse that changed the course of World War II. By the end of 1942, the Third Reich had extended its influence throughout Europe and the Mediterranean. But on November 8th, the British, American, and Canadian troops land in North Africa and regain control of Morocco and Algeria. Once settled in Maghreb, the next step for the Allied command is clear: gain a foothold in southern Europe and weaken the Nazi army, already suffering heavy losses on the Eastern Front against the Russians. For this operation, codenamed Husky, the Allies target a little island in the south of Italy, Sicily. Launch date, July 1943. The stakes are high. If Operation Husky succeeds, it could turn the tide of the war, leading to victory for the Allied forces.
It was going to be the greatest, the largest amphibious operation in history. In other words, it was going to be the largest combined attempt by sea to land on enemy country. So it was a huge enterprise. It was going to involve about 150,000 troops, tens of thousands of aircraft, tens of thousands of vehicles. It was a huge operation.
But the Allied headquarters face a major problem. The Germans anticipate an attack in the region and have readied their defenses.
The German High Command was absolutely convinced that the Allies were going to launch an attack somewhere in the Mediterranean and Southern Europe after their campaign in North Africa. So the Germans focus on a couple of rather logical points. First and foremost is Greece. Other places that the Germans thought it might happen are places like Sardinia or Corsica, and then of course Italy. But the question is precisely which one are the Allies going to come at?
For Operation Husky to succeed, the Allies must force Hitler to move his troops. In great secrecy, Churchill assembles the London Controlling Section, an ultra-secret organization of high-ranking Army and British intelligence personnel. Their mission: to craft a diversion plan to convince the Germans that the attacks will happen not in Sicily, but in Greece and Sardinia. In Kew, a suburb of London, the National Archives has preserved the documents recounting this vast military plot. In top-secret files, two names stand out: Charles Cholmondeley and Ewan Montague, both members of the British intelligence services. They concoct a plan worthy of the greatest spy movies. Its name, Operation Mincemeat. This document details Montague and Cholmondeley's incredible scheme. They want to drop into the sea a corpse dressed like a British officer who died in a plane crash. The body would carry confidential documents suggesting an invasion in Sardinia and Greece. The goal, to let this false information fall into the hands of the Germans.
The whole idea of taking a corpse and using it as a deception tool with such a massive plan behind it, the invasion of Southern Europe, is absolutely crazy, for sure. On a balance of probability, if you entertain this in 1942-43, it seems ludicrous, it seems near insane. It's so insane that it's brilliant. And it's also really, really cool. It's got all the elements you could possibly imagine for a cool story. A dead body that's disguised, really interesting players, you know. It's a fantastically interesting story. And there's no question in my mind that the plan that unfolds, the entire Operation Mincemeat, stands as one of, if not the most important, intelligence operations of World War II.
Cholmondeley and Montague work relentlessly to implement this crazy plan. Each detail must be carefully prepared.
Creating a legendary agent, as in the case of the mincemeat, represents a one-off type of operation for most intelligence services. So in that sense, I don't believe there's any real template or any particular formula that one has to follow. You are almost, in every instance, is making it up as you go along.
The first step is finding the ideal corpse. But there's one essential requirement. No one should care about it.
The reason that British intelligence needs a body that nobody cares about is because there's too many loose ends. If you take a corpse that has family or friends or dies in a particularly public fashion, there are going to be lots of questions. There are going to be people that want a funeral. There are going to be people that want to file for pension payments. There's all sorts of really, mundane things in the long run that would throw the entire intelligence operation out of the way. There's also moral and ethical considerations. Even in the midst of World War II, people are worried about doing indignities to a body without permission. So they need a corpse that nobody cares about. It's a very sad, morbid occasion, but that's precisely what they needed. No questions means a higher chance of success.
Another requirement. The body must pass as a man who drowned at sea after a plane crash. The condition of his skeleton, his lungs, the level of decomposition. Every detail matters in case the corpse gets autopsied. They enlist the help of a coroner and a forensic pathologist. In these times of war, corpses are not necessarily lacking in London. And yet, the search proves extremely difficult. According to Montague's report, after 2 months of looking in vain, their luck finally turns. The coroner and pathologist find a potentially interesting cadaver.
On the 28th of January, there had died at St. Stephen's Hospital, Fulham, a labourer of no fixed abode. His name was Glendower Michael, and he was 34 years of age. 2 days earlier, he had taken phosphorus rat poison.
The deceased is a young Welshman who lost his parents and apparently lived cut off from the world. No one seems to care about his disappearance. Did he die from accidentally eating rat poison? Was it suicide? Nobody knows. But for the forensic pathologist, his means of death fits the storyline of Operation Mincemeat.
The rat poison did have the general effect that is known to occur, which is liver failure. Actually, the liver undergoes what is called necrosis, which means death of the liver cells. Even under the best of circumstances, it is rather difficult to detect rat poison, phosphorus. But if you now add to that the idea that the body will begin to undergo decomposition and putrefaction, then it is highly unlikely to even think of rat poison or phosphorus.
For Cholmondeley and Montague, a death by rat poisoning provides a great opportunity. British intelligence feels confident. With a cause of death so hard to detect, the chances of the Germans to accept the idea of a death by drowning would be even higher. The body of the homeless man is discreetly set aside, held at a temperature of 4 degrees Celsius, 39 degrees Fahrenheit, in the morgue of St. Pancras Hospital. According to the pathologist at the time, the body would last for about 3 months. Ewan Montague and Charles Cholmondeley must now construct the legend of this man so that he can accomplish his post-mortem mission. First, create a credible identity.
They needed to convince the Germans that the courier that they were going to use was a man who would be expected to be holding documents like that. So they choose a major in the Royal Marines. That's a reasonably senior rank, the sort of person that you'd expect to be carrying documents like that. Another reason why they could choose a Royal Marines officer is that they could use a regular British Army uniform. You don't have to bring in a specialist tailor to measure a dead body, and therefore, if you do that, then you're putting your secrets at risk, because how can you trust the tailor that you're bringing in to keep the secrets that he's going to be seeing?
So, here he is, a corpse who's a major with the Royal Marines, in his uniform, and finally, with a name. The hero of Operation Mincemeat is Major William Bill Martin, born in Cardiff in 1907. He just needs a face.
Michael was 34 when he died, so they get a guy at the same age group and approximately the same physique in order to take a photograph, and it's one of their own, an MF5 officer, who gives up his own photograph and his own identity temporarily, wearing the same suit that the body is found in order to appear that it is the same guy.
But to be credible, the character must also have a story, a private life, a personality. What spies call the legend of Major Martin. Who was he? How did he live? Who were his friends and what were his hobbies? What did he do on his final days in London before leaving on his mission and crashing into the sea? Cholmondeley and Montague step into the shoes of their fictitious hero. They plant clues in the pockets of his uniform. Coins, an open pack of cigarettes, matches, a pair of keys, 2 bus tickets, even a photo of Pam, his fictitious fiancée. He carries 2 used theatre tickets dated April 22nd and a bill from the Naval and Military Club in London where he stayed until April 23rd. This makes it possible to date his departure. Everything stops April 24th, the day he's meant to fly and crash.
They have made Michael, a Welsh vagrant who nobody knew and cared about, sadly, they make him a real person with an entire backstory. And that backstory is painstaking. It's a very interesting moment where you see, the mental acuity of the planners. And then you also really see how clever the operation is. They put artifacts in his wallet and on his person that gives you a very rich tapestry.
The invented life of Major Martin is fully fleshed out. Now, Cholmondeley and Montague move on to the next step of the plan. To determine the exact place to drop the body where the Germans will find it, they know the spot: Huelva in southwest Spain.
Spain during the Second World War was a neutral country. However, it was quite closely aligned with Nazi Germany. Franco, who's in charge in Spain, had a quite close relationship with Hitler. And the reason why the Allies wanted to land documents in Spain in this way was that they felt very strongly that there was a high chance that the Spanish will actually pass the documents that come into their possession, or copies of them, to the Germans.
There was a man in Huelva named Adolf Kloss who was an excellent German spy and a committed Nazi. The Germans knew it, but also the Brits knew it. And they felt that if they could get this into the hands of Kloss, it would end up in the right hands.
Huelva is on the route from Great Britain to North Africa. Major Martin's itinerary takes shape. Flying from London to Algiers, his plane will suffer a tragic fate off the Andalusian coast, where Major Martin will drown near the beach. Now, Cholmondeley and Montague need to find the best way to drop the body into the sea. And most of all, in the perfect location to assure it's found and brought to the Spanish coast.
Several mechanisms were considered for how to deliver the body into the sea off the west coast of Spain. One of these was to land it by basically to drop the body from the air, but that was dismissed because the body would become damaged once it being dropped from a height into the water. Another suggestion was to drop it by ship, but again the danger there was that it might be seen. It could be seen by the shore. Another idea was landing it by a seaplane, a flying boat, but in the end the decision was taken to drop it from a submarine. A submarine could reach the coast quietly, unseen, and then it could just gently slip the body into the water and then leave without being seen as well. So in the end, they settled on the submarine option.
The submarine HMS Seraph is due to leave Scotland on April 19, 1943 for North Africa. It's a perfect schedule, providing Major Martin's last voyage, along with the documents he carries. Those crucial documents, the bait in an elaborate trap. The fictitious Major is supposedly flying to the Allied headquarters in Algiers. So he carries letters intended for officers stationed in North Africa. To justify sending them by special courier, the letters must be both personal and of the utmost importance.
As with most intelligence operations, it's not the big failures that get you, it's the small ones. The people running this operation knew absolutely that any detail that was checkable would be checked, and it had to fit with the story they were representing and had to be not only plausible, but reasonable. What can the Germans reasonably find out about a person who would have been in Major Martin's position? Do the British have couriers like this? Are there staff officers like this? Is there a reasonable plausibility that a person would be carrying these papers on a flight and then somehow be killed? And that had to appear reasonable to them.
After many drafts, General Archibald Nye writes the first letter and signs it personally. The recipient, his friend, General Harold Alexander, stationed in Tunisia.
It was agreed by the Chief of Staff that the 5th Division should be reinforced by 1 brigade group for the assault on the beach south of Cape Araxos, and that a similar reinforcement should be made for the 56th Division at Kalawata. Jumbo Wilson had proposed to select Sicily as cover target for Husky.
The first document is absolutely key because it's in this document that the principal target is outlined as Greece. That's the deception that the Allies want to put over to the Germans. The letter is to suggest that the invasion, codename Husky, is actually going to Greece, and that the Sicily operation is actually a cover. Mentioning the word Husky in the operation is quite interesting because that suggests that they want the Germans to believe, if they ever come across that codename Husky in other documents or through their own spies, that's a real operation, but in fact it's going somewhere else. It might seem risky to use the real codename in an operation, but actually there's some thought behind that.
To complete the story, Major Martin carries 2 more letters.
The second letter is another important letter. It is written again by a very senior British officer, Mountbatten, and it's a letter introducing Major Martin to Admiral of the Fleet Cunningham, who is a very senior naval officer in the Mediterranean. It is designed to convince the Germans that this is a real man who is on a mission. But there's also one interesting element to the letter which is also built into the deception, and that's the final line.
Let me have him back, please, as soon as the assault is over. He might bring some sardines with him. They are on points here.
The joke about sardines is, I think, one of the most risky but also the most brilliant little component. It's a reference to the fact that the British were in fact possibly entertaining an attack on Sardinia, hence sardines. Where the brilliance come in is that the British understood, the Germans understood British humor. So it's this kind of, I know what you know kind of thinking.
It's interesting when you think about these guys sitting in London, dreaming up these operations. And in some ways, that's even deeper than just piling up military equipment to fake an operation. This one is the ability to think your way into the mind of the German military and into Hitler himself, and to deliver those things that reinforce an instinct, which ultimately was wrong.
But Cholmondeley and Montague have a problem. If the 2 letters are put in a simple envelope, in Major Martin's uniform pocket, they could slip out and be lost after several days at sea. Losing the letters would jeopardize the entire operation. They decide to add a 3rd letter, accompanied by a military pamphlet by Eisenhower. The pamphlet, too big for a simple envelope, justifies the use of a government briefcase.
The reason for the use of a briefcase was that they wanted the Germans to see it. They wanted it to be found. They wanted the Spanish, or whoever found the body, to find this briefcase and realize there were documents in it.
To be sure the briefcase will not be lost, they attached it to Major Martin with a chain. This will also reinforce the importance of the documents. To simulate death by a plane crash, our man is decked out with a life jacket and a rubber dinghy. With every detail of the plan in place, on April 15, 1943, the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, gives it the go-ahead.
And the good news is that Winston Churchill is an aficionado of intelligence. He thinks it's big, he thinks it's clever, he thinks it's going to work. And of course, he had hesitation, like any leader would, because, as he famously said, anybody but a fool would believe we're coming to Italy. But the Germans were foolish. So there's a possibility that they're going to actually buy it and move to Greece.
Churchill has just one requirement: get approval on the American side from General Eisenhower, who grants an authorization 2 days later.
Chief of Staff, on behalf of General Eisenhower, gives full approval. Mincemeat.
Operation Mincemeat can commence. On April 17, 1943, Cholmondeley and Montague returned to the morgue one last time. According to official reports, the two men slip all the objects in Major Martin's pockets and attach his briefcase with the confidential documents. The corpse is then placed in a custom-made steel box. But for some, especially the forensic pathologist, Dr. Peter Speth, this scenario doesn't hold. Glendower Michael's cadaver has suffered too many temperature changes since his death 3 months prior.
In my opinion, when Montague went to the morgue on the 17th to get the body out of the freezer, I think what really happened was, oh my God, we can't use this body. What are we gonna do? He was just too badly decomposed. The stench would have been so overwhelming, so unbearable.
For Dr. Speth, there is no doubt. Glendower Michael never left London. At the last moment, Cholmondeley and Montague might have replaced his body with the corpse of a young Marine who died a few days earlier in Scotland when the aircraft carrier HMS Dasher exploded.
You only have Ewan Montague's book and the documents as a source, and it's impossible to know if there was a switch. I do think you can understand why they would have preferred the drowned body of a young British sailor. That would have been perfect. Certain things puzzle me a little bit about Martin's using Glendower Michael. I think there's room for speculation, and I think there's room for an open mind. And we have to remember that we're dealing with deception. And the deception may have continued after the war for various reasons. It's difficult to know.
Part of me says, yeah, it's quite plausible because, of course, the British government would want to keep that stuff secret. Had you employed another body, there are all sorts of moral, ethical, legal considerations that go into the calculation. So I understand why people believe that stuff. And this is a world of conspiracies. Many of them turn out to be true, I suppose, so I get it. All that being said, the best evidence that we have from people that have spent a lot of time researching every component is that it was, in fact, Glendower's body. So barring any release of government evidence from the British in particular, we are sort of inclined to go with the official story, which is super interesting.
We may never know who boarded the submarine HMS Seraph in a sealed canister on April 19th at 6 o'clock. But whoever he is, he carries with him all hope for Operation Mincemeat. "11 days later, at 4:15 a.m., Bill Jewell, the captain of the submarine, along with 5 officers who learn of the plan last minute, surface and come out on deck. They're 1,500 meters off the coast of Huelva, where they drop the corpse into the open sea. Early in the morning, fishing for sardines like any other day, an Andalusian fisherman discovers the body of the English Royal Marine. He brings him to the coast and hands him over to Spanish authorities. But things will not go according to plan.
The British plan had basically hoped that Spanish fishermen or somebody in the water in Spain would find the corpse, turn it over immediately to the Spanish military or Spanish police, and it would end up, contents included, all of the documents in German hands. The problem is that the Spanish authorities refused to turn over the body and refused to turn over the documents.
Even worse, the Spanish authorities decide to conduct an autopsy, the first test of the British agents' elaborate scheme.
According to Montague, they were shocked and very concerned when they found out that the body was transported by ferry up the river to Huelva and that the medical examiner would perform an autopsy. They were assuming, particularly because they made the body to appear to be a Catholic, that the body would simply be looked at, yeah, probably drowned, and then be buried. They had never counted on a forensic pathologist or medical examiner conducting an autopsy.
It was a relatively thorough examination in the sense that they did exactly what most autopsies would do. They have questions, but they come up with answers. One of them notes that it appears to have been, further decomposed than a regular body would, even after 4 or 5 days in the ocean, which is, of course, exactly what the operation was designed to avoid in the first place. So there's this enormous tension while the British wait to see how this has been digested by Spanish authorities.
As the Spanish doctors conduct the autopsy, some other details puzzle them. One is the position of the corpse's hairline. It appears to be much further back than in the photograph discovered on the body. Will the doctors conclude that the body they're autopsying is not the man in the picture?
The Spanish doctor says, well, the receding of the hairline would be consistent with the attrition and movement of the skin on the scalp in terms of the water and the effects of the salt in the water in shaping the hairline. So what the autopsy does is bring up legitimate questions, as opposed to an autopsy to say, don't worry about it, everything's fine, but at the same time provide answers.
Despite the questions raised by the autopsy, the Spanish authorities reached the conclusion the Allies had hoped for. Officially, the man drowned at sea, and his body remained immersed for 8 to 10 days before being found.
I think there was a real incentive to want to believe it and to overlook some of the realities around it. I think had there been a thorough autopsy, the results may have shown something very different. But this was all very rushed. Get it together and get it up to Berlin and score a victory, with the Fuhrer.
On May 2nd, William Martin is buried in Huelva in the presence of British Army officials. But British intelligence now faces another unexpected move. Instead of giving the briefcase with all the documents to the Germans, after the autopsy, the doctors give it to Spanish Navy officials.
And the Navy is far less for the Germans and Italians than is the Army. And there is a kind of sense of Spanish pride and sovereignty about it, which you can understand. And not everybody in Spain was all that loyal to Franco, let alone to the idea of Germans and Italians as overlords. There were quite a few people in Spain who were much fonder of the Allies than of the Axis powers.
The Spanish Navy refuses to give the British major's briefcase to the Nazi officials. On the German side, the race begins to get their hands on the documents. Adolf Klaus, the most active spy in Huelva, goes into action. But not one officer will open the envelopes for Agent Klaus. All he receives is a detailed list of the documents and objects found on the body. For both sides, the Spanish loyalty to the British is a catastrophe. The briefcase leaves the small port of Huelva for Madrid to be handed over to the British authorities. But the Reich agents don't give up, and they finally get lucky. At least, that's what they believe. On May 8, 1943, pro-Nazi Spanish officers unsealed the envelopes in Major Martin's briefcase. The operation is extremely delicate. The British authorities cannot find out that the letters were opened by their enemies. Once opened, the letters are given to German agents, who have less than 1 hour to photograph them. The Spanish officers carefully return the letters to their envelopes. They immediately send the photos to Berlin. The Fremde Heer, an intelligence organization of the Reich, is responsible for verifying their authenticity. At the head of the investigation, Alexei von Rohen, Hitler's favorite intelligence analyst. With his team, he scrupulously studies all the elements at his disposal. But something doesn't add up. According to the Spanish forensic pathologist, the body spent 8 to 10 days in the water before being discovered on April 30th. But in one of Major Martin's pockets is an invitation to a party at a London cabaret club, dated April 27th.
The British put this invitation with the intention of just adding to his personal items. The Germans interpreted this as an event that he had actually attended and did the math on it and said, you know, this must have been one of the last things he did before he left London, and then he shows up dead in Spain, and they can't square the condition of the body based on the autopsy report with the fact that a couple of days earlier he had been at a club in London.
For the Brits, the invitation was an unimportant detail, and now it's about to jeopardize the entire operation.
In the Second World War, counterintelligence services are very good. If a counterintelligence service suspects something, they will pull that string until they unravel everything they can.
Alexei von Rohen asks Spain for more information. The local Abwehr office replies that there is absolutely no doubt of the letter's authenticity. But the Germans aren't convinced. Some of those closest to Hitler, like Goebbels, remain skeptical of this seemingly God-sent information. Thankfully, though, within the secretive powers of the Third Reich, only one man has the last word.
Ultimately, it doesn't really matter what Goebbels or anyone else thinks, it's what Hitler thinks. And when it ends up on Hitler's desk, he's convinced that it's the real thing.
In a regime like the Nazis, failure is not really an option. If you manage to upset somebody in the chain of command, especially Hitler, chances are you end up with a bullet in your head. So no matter how intelligent and capable German intelligence can be, it's horribly undermined by ideological and political concerns. So all of this leads the Germans to hear what they want to hear and believe what they want to believe.
The Führer himself is convinced that the Allies are preparing an attack against Greece and Sardinia. But meanwhile, England has no idea that the Germans finally arrived at that conclusion. It's been days since surveillance teams have intercepted enemy communications, and they found no messages about William Martin's letters.
From the placement of the body in the sea up for the next few weeks, there is real tension in London. I would sort of characterize it as near panic because everything could go possibly wrong with this enterprise. And it must have been agonizing because there's pretty much dead silence coming from either the Spanish or the Germans. So there's tension, there's confusion, and there's a lot of trepidation about what could go wrong. And again, it's not because of the body per se, it's because there are invasion plans for Southern Europe which are at stake here, and many thousands of lives are involved, so it's a big stakes game.
Finally, on May 14th, 1943, 2 weeks after the body was dropped in the sea, the long-awaited signal finally arrives.
The German had information from an absolutely reliable source that large-scale Allied landings were projected in the near future in both the eastern and western Mediterranean.
The Allies are relieved. The ploy seems to have worked as planned. But the landing in Sicily is scheduled for July 10th, 2 months later. The lie has to endure. So the Allied secret services take drastic steps to misinform and maintain the enemy's illusion.
The British use quite a few double agents, or agents of their own, who are sending false information to Germany. For example, in the UK, you have Agent Tricycle, and he sends the Germans fake observations of Allied movements in Scotland and the United Kingdom to suggest that they're preparing for an invasion in Greece. In North Africa, there was also a fake army, an entire fake army, the 12th Army, with 12 divisions, was invented, completely fictional. And that was using things like inflatable tanks, inflatable trucks that could be seen from the air or from the spies, who might think they looked genuine. There were soldiers who were moving around, who of course were not really going to take part in an invasion, but were part of a fake division. There were Greek currency, Greek newsletters, Greek guidebooks were issued among these troops and were in circulation in North Africa to suggest that this fictional army was actually destined for Greece. So a huge amount of effort was put in to create a make-believe army that never actually existed.
The best way to view Operation Mincemeat is to liken it to a jigsaw puzzle, an enormously complicated jigsaw puzzle with thousands of pieces. One out of place could throw the entire picture down the tube. And in that sense, the intricacy, the complexity of this program, from planning everything about the body all the way up to feeding into the German intelligence system, is unbelievably risky. It is lunacy.
From the start, the plan was crazy, but it works. In early summer, Hitler orders 18,000 men from the 1st Panzer Division in France to head to Greece. They are joined by torpedo boats from Sicily, and minefields are installed along the Greek coast. In Sardinia, the Germans double their presence and send 10 more armed divisions to protect the Balkans. The Führer's message to the Allies is clear. We know about your plan to attack, and you will not succeed. But the Allies do attack, where Hitler least expects it. On July 10th, 1943, 160,000 men and 600 tanks arrive on Sicily's coast.
When the invasion came, the first lines of resistance that the Allies hit, many of them were Italian soldiers, and it became quite clear that these were second-rate, second-class soldiers. And this, I think, is also evidence of the fact that the enemy, the Germans and the Italians, did not feel that a strong invasion was coming. So they put troops in the front line there who weren't first-class troops.
The Allied assault doesn't worry the German military. On the same day that the fighting is raging on the Sicilian beaches, 21 fighter planes leave the island to head to Sardinia.
Hitler is absolutely convinced that the invasion will come on Greece, Sardinia, and even after the invasion has taken place, he sees this as a diversionary action, still waiting for the big attack to come in Greece.
After several weeks, the Allies finally take the city of Messina. on August 17, 1943, ending the campaign in Sicily. For the Nazi Empire, this breach signals the beginning of the end. During the following months, the Allied forces will regain Italy, and in 1944 will land in Normandy and Provence, before ultimately invading Berlin in April 1945, where Hitler will commit suicide.
The campaign in Italy is key to the Allies because it draws German forces away from the Eastern Front and it draws German forces away from the Western Front after the Allies land there in 1944. So it soaks up enemy resources, and that's exactly what the Allies wanted to achieve.
Today, seeing the full scale of the Allied forces to liberate Europe, Operation Mincemeat seems like a small detail of World War II. And yet the scheme, stranger than fiction, is unprecedented in the history of intelligence.
You couldn't write a novel like this, it wouldn't be credible. But, the combination, I think, of the creativity, but also the insight and the luck all combined to make an astonishing operation and a consequential outcome that I think one can really admit saved tens of thousands of lives.
Mincemeat is an example of great ingenuity, inventiveness, and just the way that the human mind can work and can think up the most extraordinary schemes. It is an operation that I think today, when we look back on it, we might take it almost for granted. But if you put yourself in the shoes of Cholmondeley and Montague at the beginning, it's an amazing thing to have thought up. It's a fantastic success of creative thinking.
These two men at their core are imaginative, gifted creators, if you like. They're really no different than your Steven Spielbergs or whoever else in today's world who are so creative to make the imagination run a little bit wild. And they were blessed to have a team, and that includes high political leaders like Eisenhower and Churchill, who, whether through desperation or confidence, decided to put it into play. And it works magnificently.
Like a grain of sand in the Germans' well-oiled war machine, the plan crafted by Montague and Cholmondeley played a crucial role in the success of the Sicily invasion and changed the course of the war.
There's so many things that go into World War II, right? It's military, political thinking, economics. But yes, in a very real sense, this operation changes the nature of the war. It allows the Allies to get a foothold into Italy, to throw out Mussolini, to make vulnerable the German defenses. It saves countless numbers of lives, and it puts Germany on the defensive even more than they already were. So ironically, an unknown Welsh vagrant drunk who dies of rat poisoning becomes the most important man in World War II? Sure, I think there's some reason to suggest that's actually the case.
Without having ever existed, Major Martin contributed to the fall of the Nazi Empire. Today, his body still rests in Huelva, Spain. But the British government has added another name on the grave. Glyndŵr Michael, who died at the age of 34. The man who never was becomes the man he was at the start. A Welshman who, without ever knowing it, saved thousands of Allied lives after his death.